Mordecai? You want to be Mordecai, or I think Coy needs to be Mordecai.
Boy's Mordecai.
Okay.
We are.
So why don't you
acting
be
out this
why don't you
passage.
be the pretty Esther's little sister that
She could
is
be one
not-
of Esther's attendants.
Okay,
Esther has young
you're-
women who attend to her.
Yeah.
That could be Georgia too. Georgia can be an attendant.
Okay. And then Javen is one of the
Be patient with
Jaden
us.
is one of the townspeople. Okay.
So the way this works is I'm going to start reading the story, and if you hear your name in your part, you're just going to try to reenact what you hear. There's no right or wrong. You just kind of go with the flow, and this is obviously we haven't practiced this. This is very much improv.
Yes.
Okay.
We're
It's
doing
very
an
much
improv.
Improv of
Tonight.
Esther. Okay.
Okay.
And we're not
So-
reading all of it, so you're listening for your part.
Okay. So what are you? Who are you?
Mordecai.
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 I'm King H.
A.
King A.
King A.
No idea.
You're the attendant.
Okay.
Georgia.
Esther. Haman.
Yeah. All right.
Georgia, you're either the attendant, sweetie, or you're sitting there. What do you want to do?
You want to? Y'all are like the children of Israel. So, like at some point, Esther is going to call for her people to pray. So
Okay.
when they do, you got to get down and act like you're praying, right? And then, like, they're going to do a fast, a 3-day fast. And so you're going to be like, nope, I'm not eating, and I'm praying, right? So,
Okay.
all right, so y'all ready? So if as your name's called, you can kind of come out and act however mom is reading it.
Okay. And I'm not reading. Am I going to skip through some of this?
Yeah, you can skip
I'm going to
through
start in chapter 2. So he's kind of giving you the setup. So after these things, when the anger of King A had abated, he remembered
You're angry.
Vashti and what she had done and what she had been decreed against her. Then the king's young men who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king. And let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in Susa, the citadel, under custody of the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let them be given cosmetics, and let the young women please the king instead of Queen Vashti." This pleased the king, and he did so. There was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives carried away with the king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure, was lovely to look at, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered at the citadel, Esther was also taken into the king's palace and put in custody. And the young women pleased him and won his favor. He provided her with cosmetics and portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, he advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. And every day, Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her.
So let's
Okay.
act that out, right? Just a little bit, or no?
It's good.
No?
Yeah, we got better parts. So this
Okay,
went on
okay.
for 12 months. And during the 12 months, it was beautification, where for 6, and I don't really even understand this, but for 6 months, the young women, there were many of them, Esther was one of them, they would beautify themselves with oil and myrrh. And then 6 months with spices and ointments. And the king basically had a turn with each of the women. They went before the king, and he decided if he liked them or not, essentially. Now, when the turn came for Esther, who Mordecai had taken as his own daughter to go to the king, she asked for nothing except what the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the women, advised. And Esther was winning favor in the eyes of all who saw her. And when Esther was taken to the king, into his royal palace in the 10th month, the king loved Esther more than all the women. She won grace and favor in his sight, so that he set the crown on her head and made her queen. Then he gave a great feast for all his officials. It was Esther's feast. He granted the remission of taxes to the provinces and gave gifts with royal generosity. Now she has become queen. Now, when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. And in those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded became angry and sought to lay hands on King A. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of Chronicles in the presence of the king. So Esther and Mordecai basically stopped a plot to harm King A. Is everybody with us? Kids are doing a good job. Okay. Here we are. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Now I'm in chapter 3.
After they save King A from this plot, then Haman begins to plot against Mordecai and the Jews.
Yes. Okay. So King A now promotes Haman. Where's my Haman?
So Haman, you're promoted.
And advanced him and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down to Haman, bowed down. Who's my, yes, okay. Bowed down
Georgia.
to Haman, for the king had commanded this. But guess what? Mordecai did not bow down. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai,
he's wanting you to bow down, but you're like, nope, not happening.
why do you transgress the king's command? And when they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury.
Mad, Alex.
But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So as they made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom. Now, they have all this. Haman is trying to set up a plot, and he basically says, he goes to King A, so go to King A, and he says, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people. They do not keep your laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that they may be put into the king's treasuries. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money is given to you, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you. Then the king's scribes were summoned, and an edict was written that Haman commanded, and it said to every province, and it was sent to every different language, and it was written in the name of King A, and it was sealed with his ring. And these letters were sent with instruction to destroy and kill and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the document was to be issued, a decree in every province, by proclamation to all the peoples to be ready for that day. The couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king. The decree was issued in Susa the citadel, and the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. All right, that's where we're at. So there's been a decree. You can act like you said, yeah.
What is the
decree? What did they say?
What is the decree, guys?
What was the decree that was sent out to everyone? What essentially did it say to do? Yep.
All of them.
All of them. And it was going to be on a certain day. Yeah, it was like the 13th day of the 12th month. And the whole city was in chaos. Okay, so this is where we're at in the story. All right? When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes.
Don't do that.
Act like you're tearing it. Put on sackcloth and ashes, and went into the midst of the city and cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's command and his decrees reached, there was a great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting. And many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's young women and her eunuchs came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to her, and she told him to go to Mordecai and to learn what this was and why it was. So he went to Mordecai in the open square in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him all that happened to him and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain to her and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. So the eunuch went, told Esther everything Mordecai had said, and Esther spoke to the eunuch, told him to go back to Mordecai, and said, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law, and it's to be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, so that he may live. But as for me, I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days. They told Mordecai what Esther said. Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, so we're going back and forth here. And this is Mordecai's reply to Esther. Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa. Hold a fast on my behalf. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything that Esther ordered him.
All right, so let's recap, guys. What's happening? What's happening in this story?
Here, say it a little bit louder. Here. It's okay.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi.
Esther required Mordecai to, he asked Mordecai to go somewhere.
Yeah. And what did she tell him that she wanted everyone to do, that she would do it too? Who knows that answer?
So fast and cover themselves with ashes. And
Fast,
dirty.
don't eat, don't drink. How many days?
3.
3. Okay, and she said, tell all the Jews to do this, and I and my maidservants essentially will do it as well, right? Okay, so this is where we're at in the story now. Esther also said something very powerful.
Mordecai was wanting Esther to do what?
Mordecai was wanting Esther to go before the king without permission. And what she told him was, nobody does that. If you go before the king without him calling you, you will die unless he gives you the golden scepter. So she's basically telling Mordecai, you're basically sending me to die by doing that. If he has not called for me, I cannot go before him. And Mordecai pleads with her and basically says, what does he basically say to her? If you don't step in, okay, you and your people will perish. You and your people will perish. And so I think Esther has a change of heart and realizes at this moment, and he challenges her. And there's 2 famous lines in this chapter that you hear quoted a lot. Okay, you all have probably heard this. And one of them is when Mordecai says, who knows? Maybe you were here for such a time as this. And another line is, if I perish, I perish. Those are 2 very famous quoted scriptures in the book of Esther. And so we're at the sort of the climax of this story of what's going on. We're preparing. She's like, we need to fast. We need to pray. We want everyone to fast and pray so that when I go before the king, I can have favor. That's where we're at in the story. So what do y'all think is going to happen?
So Esther, you have a decision to make, right? Is her mic on? Can you turn it on, Rhodey?
It should be on.
She's
All of them were on, but it's fine.
testing. Can you turn it up?
Tell them what number it is.
It's number 5. Testing. Okay.
Okay.
Leave that one alone, baby.
Okay.
So,
Ooh, he turned you up.
Okay. Can you turn this one down?
Woo! That's 2.
This is 2. That's 5. What now? Well, what about mine? Turn mine down. Here. She can use this one.
Testing.
Okay, so your decision is you can decide to not go before the king, and what's going to happen?
Die?
No.
No. Oh, wait, what?
Okay, never mind.
What's
Okay. So we've got 2 choices.
mind. You didn't-
All right, here we are.
Testing.
Okay, ready? It's okay. Chapter 5. So on the 3rd day, so they've been fasting and they've been praying. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes, stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters, and while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite to the entrance of the palace. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight, and he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter, and the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you even to the half of my kingdom." And Esther said, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared for the king." The king said, "Bring Haman quickly so that we may do as Esther has asked." So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther prepared. And they were drinking wine after the feast, and the king said to Esther, "What is your wish? It will be granted to you. What is your request? Even to half of my kingdom it will be fulfilled." And Esther said, "My wish and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, if it pleases the king to grant my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the feast that I will prepare for them tomorrow. I will do as the king has said." What's interesting here is she's delaying what she is ultimately asking. Now, I don't know why she delays. Does she delay because she wants to get a plot going, as we're going to see? But notice she's feeding them food. She's giving them wine. She's trying to sort of let them relax. Okay, and it almost looks like she's going to have a little bit of a manipulation of her own self here. Okay, yeah, so she's setting up a plot herself. Okay, she's setting up a plot herself. So she's saying, "Come back tomorrow and let's do this again." So hey, now get this. So we're not going to go into it gets really kind of confusing, but I'll try to go through some of it. Haman went out that day joyful and glad of heart, but when he saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and that Mordecai neither rose nor trembled before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Where's Haman?
Amen.
Okay.
So you come past
Nevertheless.
Mordecai and you're mad.
Yeah. You walk by Mordecai and you're really mad. Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and brought his friends and his wife. And he recounted to them the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he advanced him above the officials and the servants of the king. Haman said, "Even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared, and tomorrow I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all of this is worth nothing to me so long as I see Mordecai, the Jew, sitting at the king's gate." Then his wife and all his friends said to him, "Why don't you get a gallows?" Y'all know what a gallows is? Does anyone know?
What is a gallows?
Good guess. Y'all know what gallows are? Gallows are what they used to set where they were going to hang people. The gallows. Okay. So his wife said, "Get a gallows 50 cubits high, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go joyfully to the king to the feast." And this pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. Now, isn't that interesting? There's a lot of things coming to me right now that I could really teach a little bit on Esther, because his wife basically manipulated him. And it was like, if you're so sick of Mordecai, just put up gallows and hang him. And then without much thought, he was like, "I'm going to do it." And that was his plan. And I don't really know how much forethought there was, but that's where we're at. Okay, so he has those gallows. So on that night, the king, could not sleep. Could not sleep. He gave orders to bring the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written how Mordecai had told about some of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold and who had sought to lay hands on the king. And the king said, "What honor or distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this?" So remember, this is what happened. Do y'all remember the first plot at the beginning of the book that we read, where Esther and her uncle saved the king from harm? Do y'all remember that? So basically, he couldn't sleep. they brought this book and they reread it, and he remembered. And he was like, what have we done good for Mordecai to stop this plot? Okay, so this is what we're at. And they said, nothing's been done for him. And the king said, who's in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai hanged on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's young men told him, Haman is there standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. Haman came in. The king said to him, what should be done to the man? Now this is interesting because Haman thought that the king was talking about himself. The king said, what should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? But who is the king talking about? He was talking about Mordecai, but Haman didn't know that. Haman thought he was talking about Haman. And Haman said, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor. Let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. And Haman was like, this is what he's about to do to me. And guess what? The king said to Haman, hurry, take the robes of the horse, if you have said, and do so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing that you have mentioned. So how do you think Haman's feeling? Haman's like, what is going on? He didn't realize that the king couldn't sleep. He didn't realize that the king remembered Mordecai. Haman is all about himself, and Haman has set up a trap to kill Mordecai. But God steps in, I believe, and puts this on King A's heart. So Haman took the robes and the horse. He dressed Mordecai, led him through the square of the city, and said everything that he was supposed to say. Mordecai returns to the king's gate. Haman went to his house, and he was mourning with his head covered. And he told his wife and his friends everything that happened. And his wife said, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. So his wife is basically like, this is not going to work. While they were yet talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried to bring Haman to the feast that Esther had prepared. Okay, so this is where we're at in this story.
Hey, Junior.
All right, y'all, you want me to keep going?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so the king and Haman were almost done. Went into the feast with Queen Esther. So this is feast number what? 2. Good job. Good job. Feast number 2. And on the second day, they were drinking wine after the feast. The king then said to Esther, what's your wish? And Esther said, if I have found favor in your sight, and if it please the king, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have been silent, for our affliction is not to be compared with the loss to the king. Then King A said to Esther, who is he and where is he who has dared to do this? And Esther said, a foe and an enemy, the wicked Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. And the king arose in his wrath from wine drinking and went into the palace garden. But Haman stayed to beg for his life from Queen Esther. What a twist of events here, y'all. For he saw that harm was determined against him by the king. And the king returned from the palace garden to where they were drinking, as Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. And the king said, will he even assault the queen in my presence in my own house? As the word left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. Then one of the eunuchs in attendance of the king said, moreover, the gallows that Haman has prepared for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, is standing at Haman's house, 50 cubits high. And the king said, hang Haman on that. So they hung Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the wrath of the king abated. So Haman is no longer. Haman is out of the picture. Haman had evil in his heart. He was all about himself. He was trying to destroy the Jews. He was trying to get Esther and Mordecai in a plot. He had a disdain for Mordecai, but the plot was twisted. Okay, now we're on chapter 8.
And so
I'm
Haman,
almost done. Yeah.
So Haman was killed.
Haman was killed. Okay. All right, on that day, King A gave to Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told him who he was to her. And the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and he gave it to Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Then Esther spoke again to the king, and she fell at his feet, and she wept and pleaded with him. Weep and cry and plead. Okay. To avert the evil plan of Haman and the plot that he had devised against the Jews. And when the king held out the golden scepter to Esther, she rose and stood before the king, and she said, "If this please the king, if I have found favor in his sight, and if the thing seems right before the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are all the providences of the king. For how can I bear to see the calamity that is coming to my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred?" Then King A said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman. They have hung him on the gallows because he intended to lay hands on the Jews. You may write as you please with regard to the Jews in the name of the king. Seal it with the king's ring, for an edict written in the name of the king and sealed with the king's ring cannot be revoked." The king's scribes were summoned at that time in the 3rd month, and an edict was written according to all Mordecai commanded concerning the Jews. And it was given to governors and officials in the provinces from India, Ethiopia, 120 provinces, to each province its own script, to each people its own language, and also the Jews in their script and their language. And he wrote the name of King A and sealed it with the king's ring. He sent the letters by mounted couriers riding on swift horses that were used in the king's service, bred from the royal stud, saying that the king allowed the Jews who were in every city to gather and defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, and annihilate any armed force of any people or province that might attack them, children and women included, and to plunder their goods. On one day throughout all the provinces of King A, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, a copy of what was written to be issued as a decree in every province was publicly displayed, and the Jews were to be ready on that day to take vengeance on their enemies.
And so let's stop there and just kind of summarize. So Mordecai went from the presence of the king in royal robes in blue and white, and a great golden crown, and a robe of fine linen and purple. And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. And then in chapter 9, the Jews obtained victory over all of their enemies. And then when we get to chapter 10, which is a short chapter, it just describes how prominent Mordecai was in the province and the kingdom. He was second in rank to King A, and he was great among the Jews and popular with the multitude of his brothers, for he sought the welfare of his people and spoke peace to all his people. So you see the prominence of Mordecai coming out, in this story, and that's the end of the story. 10 total chapters in the book of Esther.
Good job, y'all.
Hey, well, here before y'all sit down, if you'll come up here and just stand.
Sorry.
So I want to ask you guys and them. So some of you missed the story, but if you heard something that stood out to you, come on up this way and stand shoulder to shoulder. Okay? So is there anything in the story that really stands out to you about this story? It's kind of like a Disney movie, isn't it? It's where you got a villain, and the villain's trying to kill innocent people. And then you got a beautiful princess, okay, Queen Esther. You've got a prominent, strong figure in Mordecai. He's upright and honest. And then you've got the king that is making decisions, and it seems like that he is initially making decisions that is kind of aimless, that he's just kind of passing the baton and letting the second in command kind of do what they want to do, and it's kind of not paying attention some to the stories. But what stands out to you guys in this story? How quick Haman died. Yeah, so when we get to a point where Queen Esther comes before the king, And when she comes before the king, most of the time anybody that comes unsummoned is going to die. So when she comes before the king, her life is on the line, isn't it? That'd be a hard decision to make, right? Because she knows that if she does not go, then the people are going to perish. They're going to be put to death, including her possibly. But she knows if she does go, that there's likely a chance, a strong chance that she's going to die. But she makes the right decision, right? Makes the right decision. She goes to the king. He puts out the golden scepter and saves her life and says, I'm not going to allow you to be killed. What is your request? And she asks for a banquet, right? The first banquet. And so at the banquet, she asked for the king and Haman to be there. Haman leaves that first banquet thinking, man, I'm second in command. I've got everything going my way. I'm big and bad, right? He's proud. Okay? So then the second banquet comes along, and that's when he finds out his fate, right? Because a lot of things happened that night. What happened that night? Haman goes home and talks to his wife. He puts up the gallows. And what happens with the king? Do y'all remember? He can't sleep. He's restless. He's got some anxiety going on. And so his servants come in and they're reading. How many of you like your mom or dad to read to you when you go in, before you go to bed? Yeah, it makes you sleepy, don't it? So they come in to read to him, and they read a story about how Mordecai saved his life. And so he said, well, how can we honor Mordecai? And so then that all transpires that night. So then the next night, the banquet night, that's when it all gets flipped on Haman, isn't it? And then he's put to death. Right? What else stands out in the story? Do y'all think that Queen Esther was brave? Do you think that Queen Esther had favor of God? How did he give her favor? She fasted, she prayed, she's real pretty, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think that as she was young and she was growing up and she was real pretty and Mordecai got her to go before the king so the king could choose who his wife would be, do you think that she thought that God would put her in a position to save the whole people of God? You think she knew that? No. Do you see how God had his hand on Esther all of her life and raised her up with her uncle and established her so that she would be a savior to the people and be honorable? How many of you are glad that Haman got what was coming to him? Yeah? It's always good when the villain goes down, right? Anything else that stands out to you guys? No? What about y'all? Does anything stand out to y'all in this story? I'm really glad in this story that it really demonstrates the fact that God has his hand on us. And, you can't see the full plan of God. You can't see that. It's not known to you. But what is known to us is making the right decision day by day, trusting in God. And when those hard decisions come up, like Esther was put in, like Mordecai was put in, then what was their first inclination? Their first inclination was, we need to go and pray to God. We need to stop eating. We need to fast and pray and seek the Lord. And if we'll do that, then he'll see us through. And then also how God is a rewarder of those who serve him. All along, Mordecai was facing death. He was facing hostility. And at the end of the story, he was promoted to second in command of all the kingdom. And that's what our God does. So, anything else? Anything else, Katie? No? We hope that you enjoyed this tonight. We hope that you gleaned some things from it. You know, I think that it's extremely beneficial for us to be faithful to the Lord. And just see the fact that, you know, even though there's obstacles, even though there's issues that come about, and some of these in this story, they were facing death. I mean, they had such issues that it meant their death. But still, God saw them through. And if God did that for Mordecai and God did that for Esther, then he can do that for you too. There's no problem too hard for God to solve. And I want you to understand that. And when we come in here Sunday, we're going to have a big party. We're going to worship the Lord, and we're going to serve him. So if you'll bow your heads with me, we'll get out of here tonight. God, I thank you, Lord, for bringing us to church tonight. Thank you, Lord, for this story. I pray, God, that you'll help us to meditate on that as we leave and depart from our homes. Pray, God, that you'll establish us the latter portion of this week. God, that we'll be able